Hello and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me is the corn to my beans,
Sarah.
And you know what? You guys can be my squash, because we're doing a two-player perspective and accessibility for Three Sisters. Sarah, tell us a bit about this game.
All right, Three Sisters is a strategic roll and write game about backyard farming. All right, Will, how do the rules change for two players?
So for two players, it all comes down to, during setup, you choose a different number of dice based on the number of players. So two players uses the least amount of dice. Otherwise, there aren't no other changes.
And so there's no bot.
No, there is no Nanaman. You do not grow a banana when you're growing corn, beans, and squash. Sorry.
It does make sense, though. Anywho,
Yes.
moving on. So, are there any issues with the two-player experience?
So when it comes to a two-player experience, since you use less dice, the first and second player in a higher count game will have more choices.
Right.
However, I never feel like I'm missing out on choices
Yes.
in a two-player game.
Right, now to be perfectly clear, we have only ever played this two-player. I do not feel at all that there are not enough choices. I mean, certainly there are points where I want a different action, but there's always an action that is really good to take. So when you're playing with the higher player counts and you are that first or second player, I mean, that could be a good or a bad thing with having more choices, but it's...
Yeah, I would actually be a little worried playing it at higher player counts because of the paralyzing choice of having pretty much everything almost available. So yeah, in a two-player game, good or bad thing, it's all purely hypothetical. You do have fewer choices.
Yes, but other than the hypothetical that you have fewer choices, we didn't experience any problems at a two-player count.
It still feels like having almost too many choices.
Well, it is a heavier roll and write.
Yes.
So what it does well, and again, this is a kind of a personal preference for us, is that other than drafting dice, so you could draft a die that the other player wants, but other than that, you have no player interaction. What you do on your score pads is completely separated from what your opponent is doing. So some people are either going to like that or not like that. If you're looking for high player interaction in this game, you're not going to find it.
No, I don't think there's even a compete for X, Y, or Z.
No, it's do your best and compare at the end to see who did their best.
Yeah, that's the only comparison is what's your score?
Right. So dice drafting, that's the only player interaction, but there's still really not a lot of room for hate drafting because the other thing is that you have to pay so much attention to what you're doing. You're not going to really pay attention and be like, oh, if Will gets that 4, he's going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, maybe I think in the few games, we've played more than a few times. In the several games we've played, I may have made a choice once or twice where I've noticed that, but it's more not based on the number, but based on the actual action. Like I know he's going for something big and it's like, oh, he's going to build that, tractor. And I'm like, okay, I don't want him to be able to do that.
Yeah, and because there's no real dead rolls in this game, even if someone takes that one thing that you were going for because of that tractor or whatever the case may be, you're still going to be doing a whole lot on your turn. So I'm not doing X, Y, Z. Well, I'm doing a little bit of L, P, Q, throw in some G. Oh, that triggered a B. Oh, there's M and Y. So I guess one of the issues that it could happen is that when the chain goes off, you could have a situation where one player is just waiting for the other one to finish.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that might be the biggest negative, and that's, again, your mileage may vary on whether you think this is negative, because for me, if Will's going off on a huge chain of things, I'm just as interested to see what he does. So for me, I don't mind if his turn takes a couple of minutes because he's doing this and doing that. Now, granted, our dynamic is different because I'm actually writing everything on the pads of paper for him. So I am invested in his turn because I'm filling out his sheet for him. But if you're not doing that in a 2-player, game, I think it's still very interesting to see what everyone else is doing. Plus, if you're not, you could be looking at your sheets on what you plan to do next.
Of course, that could be a player interaction because it's really intimidating when someone is going off and it feels like they're marking off half their sheets.
Yeah.
Because one thing leads to another thing, which triggers off this thing, and let's not forget this ability, and I have these free actions, but I can still do.
Right.
It's overwhelming at times.
I agree. All right. Well, I think that pretty much concludes the 2-player experience. So let's talk about accessibilities. There are some challenges to this, and I will start with let me get this up right. Not that you can probably see all the details. These are the 2 large sheets. It's a lot of small text. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges is there's a lot of small text on here. I find myself picking up my sheet all the time to be like, okay, that says fruit and that says blackberry, So part of it is there is some contrast issues. The background is a little bit darker and they do use black text. There's not a whole lot that makes the words pop. And especially in the farming area where you plant the 3 crops, the words do blend into the background quite a lot. So there are some visual aspects where the words do get kind of blended in because it's not the highest contrast. And while there is a stroke line around the words, it's not as prominent as it could be to really make those words pop off of the page.
Fortunately, everything on here is open information, right. So if you have someone that does see better and can help...
Well, I wish I had someone who could see a little better.
Yeah, so you may invest in good lighting.
Yes.
Maybe some sort of device to...
Magnify.
Mm-hmm. Or just make it easier to see, whatever it takes for you to do that.
And honestly, I have thought, not really gone along with, done anything with it, but you could scan this in and enlarge it if you have larger paper, what's the larger? 11 by 17. Maybe that's a little big. But anyways, you do have some options.
Go poster size.
Go poster. Well, you can do a big poster, laminate it, and then you've got a giant, dry erase sheet. And so you could just continually use that. Anyways, yeah. It's minor, but it could impact those who have some vision issues or your eyes are getting tired. I have to say there are evenings where I'm like, my eyes are not quite up for this, but earlier in the day, if you have eye fatigue type of thing.
The other challenge I want to point out is one of a cognitive problem. The designers call this a loaded dice game, and they do that for a very good reason because this is dense with choices.
Yes.
And it's very well interconnected. So even people who are used to heavier games are constantly double checking everything they're doing, making sure they're not missing anything because there is a lot going on. And because you'll have to go from one sheet to another sheet, back to the other sheet to make sure you've done everything. And the best they have is a little note section for when you unlock an ability. And you're like, I have to also remember to check that to make sure that I'm not triggering off of anything else. It's a very dense game.
Yes. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to keep a track of. And you can earn bonuses with a lot of things. So you could be, your main action is doing this, and it gives you a bonus action. Well, then you go to take that bonus action, which then gives you another action somewhere else. And doing that action there could give you a bonus thing. And it could just compound, and it could be a point where you've got 3 or 4 bonus actions, and you could kind of lose track. Yes, there is on this side, there's a small area for you to write. I personally use it to write down which, what do you call it? The shed tools that you've accomplished or that I've accomplished. But honestly, if you're really losing track of how many bonus actions, you might want to get a die out and roll it up and down as you use things. I've definitely talked to people who really wish this was an app, and I know Ben and Matt are probably very tired of people asking them, are you going to build an app? Are you going to put it on Board Game Arena? Because there is so much cognitive overload that you do kind of feel like you need a computer to help you keep track. Like even if there was just an assistive app, like I know there's apps for scoring. Well, maybe there'd be an app that actually helps you take your turn where you can just enter in, okay, I got these 3 like bonus actions and you can mark it off. I don't know. You could probably do that on a piece of paper just as easily. But I lost my train of thought. But yes, that's kind of the thing is you could have some cognitive overload with this game. It is a heavier roll and write, so you do have to be prepared for that going into it. And so this game just might be too heavy for some people.
Right.
Okay. That's some of the challenges, but there's a lot this game does really well. And it's just like we talked about, it's open information. So you don't have to worry about hidden goals or secret cards or anything like that. So again, you could have somebody help you read your cards, get into a device, scan them in, make them larger. So there's some things that you can do to overcome the accessibility challenges.
The other thing is the more times you play the game, the more familiar you are with things and the less likely you are to forget something.
That's true.
Because you know that does lead to this, which does lead to this, and getting used to that. Now, you might get into a habit of only playing a certain way.
Like you always like the honey.
Well, I tried the honey because I completely wanted to try something new, and then I really liked it. And so now I do that. And that sort of thing.
I always do the fruit. So, so you might get into a little bit of a habit. Honestly, that's not terrible, but you do have to adjust with the dice, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
So that is the accessibility aspect. So let's go on to the conclusion.
So for 2 players, I would definitely recommend this game. It's a small little box, but man, does it pack a punch in terms of what it delivers gameplay-wise. So yeah, 2 players, definitely. I just feel like I have almost a insane amount of choices when it comes to how I approach the game, how I conduct myself and create a strategy. And I don't usually get that with 2-player dice games.
True. And the other thing I point out is we mentioned that there could be a lot of time between turns. So the nice thing with 2 players, you only have to wait for one other person to take their turn. So the game still plays really quickly. I mean, there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm doing good. I'm on a roll and I've got 1 round left. And I'm like, wait, where did the game go? I still want to do so many things.
Yeah.
It's not enough time to get this all done. So I do really appreciate the 2-player experience for it doesn't take a lot of time between turns, and it still feels like you have a lot of choices in terms of drafting the dice. So I definitely don't feel like using fewer dice is a bad thing at all. In fact, if anything, I like that condensed choice pool so that you're not overwhelmed by choices.
Yeah. So accessibility?
Accessibility, we mostly recommend this. People we would not recommend this to is anyone with like really severe vision issues that doesn't have anybody who can help or have a device that might help. The good news is there's not a lot of visual requirements. That's a lot of tracks versus like some roll and writes where you do need to fill in a map or something like that. But for the most part, it's going to be better if you have someone who can help you. And then also, as we discussed, those who might get overwhelmed by the cognitive load here, this is a heavy roll and write. That just this may not be your cup of tea.
Yeah. If your jam is, say, Yahtzee, and you find that challenging, you probably want to stay away from this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But if your jam is, say, Hadrian's Wall, Fleet the Dice game, that sort of level, then you're looking at something else that can fit right into those line of things and be a completely different game.
Yep.
So that will do it for us here at Rolling with Two. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with Two, that's TWO. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And on YouTube, please like and subscribe.
And why would you ever roll with just one when you can be Rolling with Two?